Hello everyone. Today we'll be dealing with something called the TLDR repository. The TLDR basically stands for too long did not read. Now this is a logical extension to something called a man page. Now if you have been coding for a while you might have come across the man pages. If you have not, let me give you a brief introduction. Man page is basically a documentation website for all the different commands you use. And most of these commands come with a multiple variety of options that you can tweak and twist around with for using that particular command. However, the problem is many times all these options are rarely used by developers. Just to give you a brief glimpse, most of you might have come across the git commit command. The git commit command actually has more than 40 plus options when it comes to using the command. However, most of the time you might have just used the -m or the -message, which is usually what we use to just add a message to a commit and use it to push anything, all the changes that we have to our remote repository. Now, given that the actual documentation of the git commit looks so extensively detailed, which is not a bad thing, it's just that for a developer who wants a quick idea of how to use the syntax, they might be better off just using the TLDR website. Well, let me take you to the TLDR website and let's search for the same command, git commit. In the git commit page, you can see that there are just a few examples, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, just 7 examples where you have the -m message, which is what I use most of the time. And then there are a few different options that you might use given that you have a need for them. And as you can see, this is way more concise than the actual documentation. So the TLDR repository basically helps to get the most commonly used options and syntax for most of the commands that you might use in your daily work life. Now, the reason why I chose TLDR today is actually not one, but rather 3 reasons. The first reason is that it has one of the most comprehensive READMEs out there. You'll see that the README of this particular repository consists of everything. It has your contribution.md files for understanding how to contribute to it. It has installation instructions, very highly detailed installation instructions. It also has a section linking all the related repositories, which you might find helpful, something that I've not seen many of the repositories do. So that's the first reason. The second reason is that most of the repositories that you will probably contribute to in your open source journey have some conventions. We have already seen some of the conventions when it comes to making a pull request. However, this repository also has conventions for your commit messages. And in my opinion, this is a highly regulated repository where the maintainers are very careful about what kind of changes are pushed to the main branch. And I think that's a very good thing to do, especially if you want to keep it maintainable for the long run. And the third important reason why TLDR is such a good repository to begin with for beginners in the open source world is that it comes with something called the CLA, or the Contributor License Agreement. You'll come across this agreement sometimes when you're contributing to open source repositories. Not all of them have it. Rather, only a few of them actually have a CLA agreement. And in this particular tutorial, we'll see how to fill up a CLA agreement, which is not a tough thing to do. It's just one additional step when it comes to contribution to open source. Alright, so the first thing that we need to do is to fork this particular repository in your own GitHub profile. So click on this arrow right here and create a new fork. That'll create a duplicate copy of the repository in your own GitHub account. Once you're done with this step, the next step we need to do is to clone this repository to your local desktop. And to do that, we'll need something called the GitHub CLI. If you don't have it downloaded, you can always look at the link in the description below, which goes through how you can get started with the installation process of the Git bash. However, if you do have it installed, you can just right click to wherever you want to save the clone of this particular repository, open the Git CLI, and we'll be using this particular command called the git clone. So it is the git clone, and the link is present over here. You click on this green button over here, then you copy the HTTPS link, and you can just write git clone, paste that particular link, and that should get it going. Now this might take certain time while it is being cloned, or basically downloaded from my remote repository to my local repository. Let's look at the README for this particular repository. I spoke the word repository a lot many times, but alright, I'll try to reduce that. So In the README, it goes over what is the TLDR pages, how do I use it. The how do I use it section is more for users who want to use this particular software rather than the ones who want to contribute to it. So if you're contributing to it, you should look at the section, how do I contribute to TLDR pages? And over here it says like you can add your favorite command to it, you can improve the content of an existing command or existing page, and there are also some issues that have the tag help wanted, which we'll check very soon. And they also have a contribution guideline. So before we go to the contribution guideline, let's just go with the help wanted label. And the link takes you to the issues pages of this TLDR repository, and you can look at the open issues over here. However, the link also filters based on the tag help wanted. So you can see that the label over here is filtered with help wanted, and these are the issues that are very open to contributions from especially first-time contributors because they are easy, they don't have that big of a learning curve, and in this repository specifically, the learning curve is quite small because it's more of a documentation website where all the different pages are written down in Markdown. And today we'll be going through an issue where we actually had to add the ripmime command. This issue is actually closed. I worked on this issue and I submitted a pull request on it, but just for the sake of consistency about what I contributed to this repository, I'll be going with that particular issue. And before we go into that issue, let me open the contribution guidelines, which is your contribution.md. You can also search for it in the files and folders, but they have given an easy access link. And this is also one of the reasons why I say the readmes in this repository are very helpful, especially for a first-time viewer. So in the contribution guidelines, it says try to keep the pages around 5 examples. This means 5 examples for that particular command. When in doubt, keep the new command line users in mind. Don't overcomplicate things. And there are a few other conventions which I'll not go over. It's a very highly detailed document about what you should do and what you should include in your contributions. But the most important part is how do I locally reproduce and test it? And that is the section over here. So submitting a pull request. Testing pages locally. So before we submit a pull request, we need to make sure that we are testing it locally. And to do that, they have recommended that we use the latest version of Node.js. And we use the version of Node.js to install TLDR lint with the following command, npm install global TLDR lint. And then we use this functionality called TLDR lint to test our Markdown pages. Basically, what this does is that it checks for certain errors in our Markdown files and reports the errors if it has found any. And if the output of this particular command TLDR lint to our whichever Markdown page is basically empty, that is a very good sign, because if there is no output generated by this command, it means that we are good to go and our Markdown has passed all the checks. But we'll see that in motion. All right, let's see if our cloning has happened. Okay, we have successfully cloned this repository. Now, as I said, the first step that you should do when you are working with any open source repository is, if you remember, you have to make a new branch. So let us make a new branch. We can just call it git checkout. Let's call the name of the branch adding ripmime page. So ripmime is a command that we'll be working with. And we just created a new branch which has been titled adding ripmime page. Now, if you remember, the second thing that I always advise when you're working with an open source repository is creating a new virtual environment. And in this particular tutorial, I usually like to work with Windows Subsystem for Linux, which is a wrapper on top of the Windows operating system. And I use that for working with all my projects because it gives me a Linux-like interface on my Windows operating system. You can do the same with just a normal Windows or a Mac OS machine. It's just that the command for creating a virtual environment will differ and activating the virtual environment will differ. If you have Python installed, the command for creating a virtual environment is Python 3 minus, if I'm not wrong, it is minus mvenv. And then we have to give a name to that, and I'll just call it env for environment. Alright, so our environment has been created. Let us activate our environment. For Linux, the code to activate the environment is source. Then you go to environment, bin, and activate. This command does differ for Windows and Mac OS users, so be careful about that. Once we have activated the environment, you can see that the env pops up on the left hand side of the command that we are typing, which basically means that we are within the environment. Now, once we are within the environment, let me just go to the TLDR repository, and you can see that there are a number of directories. We have pages, and then we have pages.ar, cs, es, etc. And I haven't pointed it out in the README, but the README does contain information about it. What this basically means is that the pages over here are the instruction pages in the default language, which is English. And it also supports different languages. So there are issues that help with translation stuff too, if you're interested in that. So I'm not 100% sure if the .ar stands for Arabic, but basically all these dot letters are shorthands for the different languages that we're dealing with. So I believe that this particular repository pages.ar has all the different commands in Arabic. Now, once we have entered into this repository, let us open our trustworthy VS Code to look at the different files. Let us navigate and add a new folder to this. Alright, so once we've added this folder to our VS Code workspaces, let's look at Pages. So Pages has multiple different directories. It has Android, Common, FreeBSD, Linux, etc. Again, the information about this is in the README, but what it basically means is that each of these directories have operating system specific commands. For example, Android will have Android specific commands. And if a command is common across all different operating systems, it would likely be in the common directory. Now, it has a lot of different files. So if you actually do an ls or list all the files in this particular repository, there will be quite a lot. So be aware of that. And just to show you what I mean is when you actually type in ls, you'll have a bit of a lag. And today we'll be dealing with something called the ripmime repository, ripmime command, and it is present within the Linux subfolder. So again, Linux has a lot of different commands, and the one that we'll be dealing with over here is the ripmime.md. So let me just quickly open that up. And the file I need is ripmime.md. Alright, so the issue that we will be tackling today is just adding the ripmime command, and it has already been added over here because I've already contributed to it, and the latest version of the TLDR repository already has a page for it. But again, the main focus of this video today is not to teach you how to add files, because again, it's just a markdown, and I'll go over the syntax of the markdown, but the goal is to make sure that you're able to test it locally with all the different commands and instructions given in the README file rather than actually writing these commands, because this is just text, and if you know how to work with a particular command, you can always go ahead and write it out. Alright, so as I said, the main focus is to make sure that we can test all the different markdown files that we are adding to this particular repository. So the first thing we need to do is npm install global TLDR lint, and at least that's the first step that the repository tells us to follow. So let us go back to our git bash and copy and paste this command over here. So npm install global TLDR lint. Alright, so the next step is we copy the second command, which is TLDR lint, and path to the markdown file that we're dealing with. So we are within pages of Linux, so we are just one level above the path that we want to enter. So we'll just go to TLDR lint, and we'll be typing ripmime.md. Now, over here you can see that the TLDR lint ripmime.md command returned nothing, which is a very good thing, because if you did have some errors, these errors would pop out and you will be notified by this command. Just to give you a brief demo, let me go back to this page and add some random symbols. Alright. If I do add these random symbols and run the TLDR lint again, it shows that parse error on line 21 should contain no leading white space. A single space should precede a sentence, and basically it's not that helpful of a comment, but it does show that there are some weird random characters that are causing some issues, and that's exactly my intention over here. So once you get rid of all these different syntactical errors, it'll only check the syntactical errors. You'll be able to, should contain a new line at the end of file. Okay. You should be able to run this command with no particular output, and that means that you're good to push it and commit it. Oh, sorry, quite the reverse. Commit it and push it. And over here, we didn't really make any changes, so there's nothing to commit. So let me just make a small change over here, more information at. And let me take this opportunity to run you through the contents of this file. So the heading is, of course, the command that we are writing all the details about. The second is a very short description of what this does. So extracts attachments out of a MIME encoded email package. And the second most important thing that you should always include in the TLDR repository is the link to the actual documentation that has all the different options, not just a concise version of it. So the documentation over here is at this particular website, and the hyphens or the negative signs over here, they are basically bullet points. If you have worked with Markdown, you know about it. If not, it's totally fine. And the backticks over here are a syntax that you use in order to enclose a block of text as a code. So it just formats it similar to how you would format a piece of code. And again, so as I said, these are bullet points. These are just formattings for making it look like a code block. And one important tip I'd always give you is when you're working with Markdown file, VS Code does have the feature of opening a preview. So you can right click on the file, you can click on open the preview, and that will give you a Markdown preview of it. Now again, it's not always fabulous. As you can see over here, the code blocks actually have been whitened out, and the text over here is still there. It's just that it's white in font color and has a white background, so it seems invisible. You can, of course, select it to see that, okay, there's actually text over there. And it gives you an idea of how it would look once it is rendered. So when you're contributing to the TLDR website, make sure that you run the TLDR lint command and also just check the preview of your Markdown file. Once you have done both of these, we can go back to our git CLI. And in our git CLI, click on git status to see what we have changed. It's just one file that we have modified. Given that it's just one file, we can just do git add dot. Again, I would recommend against doing it. So you should always select the file that you do want to change. So in our case, it is Linux and ripmime. The tab doesn't work, so let me just do ripmime empty. My bad over here. So let me just do ripmime again. Perfect. And now if we do git status, we should see that particular file in green. That means it is okay to create a checkpoint and commit it. So we'll do git commit -m added. Okay, but before I write a message over here, if you recall, I said the second most impressive thing about this repository is that it even gives you a convention for writing commits. So let us quickly go to the contribution.md and look at the convention it has for the commit messages. So it says the commit messages should be of the type command, followed by a colon, followed by the type of change. In our case, we are fixing a typo or we are editing a page. So what we need is the name of the command, colon, and fix typo. So let me just do that. So the name of the command is ripmime, and we just write fix typo. Once we do that, we can commit it up, we can do git push, and there should be origin, and the name of the branch that we are working with, which is adding ripmime page. And once you do that, it will push this particular change into the local copied version in your personal account, right? It's not the main repository that you're dealing with. It's just it's the fork of the repository that resides in your account. And to drive this point home, let me go back to the TLDR version on my own personal account, and it shows that this particular branch had recent pushes 4 seconds ago. And now the next and the final step is to create a pull request. So to create a pull request, just click on compare and pull request. And when you're adding the title, you need to make sure that you're following the conventions that are listed down in the README. There's also a template that you need to follow when you're contributing to this particular repository. And you can see the template right in front of me. That's basically what you need to check for when you're generating a PR. Now, again, I'm not going to generate a PR because I've already done so. It has been merged and I don't want to trouble them with a duplicate PR over here. So I'll just stop from this point onwards, and I'll take you to the actual pull request that I had made. So if you go to the pull request tab, and I'll be going for the close pull request and searching for my name over here. So I had a pull request which added the page for RepMine. And the reason I'm going through this is to teach you one other important thing when it comes to contribution to open source, and that is discussion and reiteration when it comes to contributing to any project. Now, this might look as a seemingly simple project, which it is because it's just a markdown change and it's very easy to test it out. However, even with such changes, you could have a lot of suggestions, and these suggestions come from the reviewers or the maintainers of these repositories. And TLDR, as I said, is a very strictly maintained repository. They're very strict about conventions. And so in this particular PR request, even though I checked out all the boxes over here, there were some suggestions. And this is where the suggestions come in, right? The people who are maintaining these repositories, they are very helpful in giving you all the suggestions that you need in order to improve your contribution. So these are very minor suggestions, like instead of say to get, you read instead of get. And the suggestions involved in this PR are mainly focused on some grammatical mistakes and more so on the convention. So very simple changes, does not take a lot of time, but it does make sure that the quality of the content that you're pushing in is up to the mark. And once you address all of these different suggestions and make all the relevant changes, you're fine, you're approved, and your PR merges into the main branch. The last thing I would like to cover is the CLA agreement. As you saw over here, all committers have signed the CLA. This is a mandatory requirement for the TLDR website. And in order to sign the CLA agreement, alright, so in the contribution guide, you have a section on licensing, and that is where you have the contributor license agreement. And once you click on that, it will take you to an external page, which will have a few different conditions listed on it. And the CLA agreement, in a nutshell, is more like a terms and conditions agreement. When you're working with any such repository which has a CLA agreement, it is recommended that you take a look at all the terms and conditions. However, for most of them, it's quite short and concise, like this one. And let me break it down in a nutshell. What this CLA is asking you is that all the contributions that you make to this repository will come under the license required or established by this repository. So the TLDR pages uses the MIT license. And hopefully in the future, I will have a video about different kinds of licenses. But the MIT license is one of the most open licenses, I would say, which has the least restrictions out there. So it's a completely fine CLA. You can just sign it with GitHub to agree to this terms and condition, and that is all you need to do. And once you do that, once you make sure that all the suggestions in your PRs have been addressed, you're good to go. Your PR should be merged, and that would be a sweet end to the journey of contributing to the TLDR repository. Hopefully this was worth your time, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.